It was December 20th, 1943. The skies over Germany were gray, silent, and cold. High above the clouds flew a damaged American bomber, the B-17 known as Ye Old Pub. Its young pilot, Charlie Brown, only 21 years old, gripped the controls tightly. This was his first combat mission, and the odds were already against him. Smoke trailed behind the engines, and the plane trembled like a dying bird in the freezing wind. Below them waited the German city of Bremen, filled with soldiers and anti-aircraft guns. The bomber's mission was simple: drop the bombs, then return home safely. But nothing about war was ever simple. Inside the B-17, 10 young airmen sat at their stations. Their faces were pale, hands frozen, and hearts pounding. Charlie's calm voice came through the intercom: "Hold steady, boys. We're almost there." Outside, black clouds of flak exploded around them. Each blast rocked the bomber violently. One of the engines caught fire. Another began to sputter and die. Oxygen masks dangled uselessly as shrapnel tore through the fuselage. Hugh Eckenrode, the tail gunner, was hit by a burst of flak and killed instantly. The others screamed, but there was no time to grieve. Charlie wiped the frost from his goggles and forced the plane toward the target. Their bombs had to drop, no matter the cost. "Bombs away!" the bombardier shouted. The payload fell through the open doors, vanishing into the gray smoke below. The city of Bremen erupted in fire. But before the bomber could turn home, a new terror appeared on the horizon. German fighters, Messerschmitts, raced toward them, sleek and deadly. Their guns flashed in the distance. "Incoming!" someone yelled. The first attack shredded the right wing and shattered the radio. The B-17 was now blind and alone. The enemy fighters swarmed like angry bees. Bullets ripped through the metal skin of the plane. The left engine failed completely. The tail gun was silent, its operator lay motionless. Inside, blood covered the floor. Yet Charlie refused to give up. He fought the controls, keeping the bomber level. "We're going home," he muttered. The sky outside glowed red from burning clouds. Each minute felt like a lifetime as the B-17 drifted toward the sea. Then came another shadow, sleek, black, and fast. A lone German Messerschmitt Bf 109 approached from above. Its pilot was Franz Stigler, a Luftwaffe ace with 22 victories. He spotted the crippled B-17 limping through the sky. It was an easy kill. One burst of cannon fire, and his tally would rise again. He adjusted his aim, finger ready on the trigger. But as he drew closer, something inside him hesitated. The bomber looked already dead. Through the shattered glass, Franz saw the tail gunner slumped over. The rear of the bomber was blown open. He moved alongside and looked inside the cockpit. The pilot, Charlie Brown, was pale, focused, and barely conscious. The other crewmen tended to the wounded. The plane was full of holes, engines coughing smoke. Franz whispered, "My God! They're finished." He thought of his brother, August, who had died in the war. Would I want mercy for him? Franz had been trained to kill without emotion. Yet in that frozen sky, the rules felt different. "This isn't war," he muttered. "This is murder." He eased his finger off the trigger. Over the radio, ground command demanded updates, but he ignored them. Instead, he signaled to the American crew with hand gestures, pointing downward, trying to tell them to land in Germany and surrender. Inside the bomber, Charlie stared, confused. The German wasn't shooting. Charlie shook his head firmly. He would not surrender. Not now. Not ever. Franz sighed inside his cockpit. He admired the young pilot's courage. But he also knew the truth: the bomber would never survive the flight back across the North Sea. Still, he couldn't bring himself to destroy them. Slowly, Franz throttled down and positioned his plane beside the wounded B-17, flying wing to wing. From below, German gunners watched, but no one fired. For 10 long minutes, the two enemy aircraft flew side by side. The German pilot guarded the American plane, pretending to escort it as if captured. Below, anti-aircraft batteries held their fire, believing the B-17 was under control. Inside, Charlie's crew stared in disbelief. "He's protecting us," someone whispered. When they finally reached the edge of the sea, Franz raised his gloved hand in salute. Charlie, still stunned, raised his in return. Franz held his salute for a moment longer. In that frozen silence, two enemies understood each other without words. Then, slowly, the German peeled his fighter away and disappeared into the clouds. The American bomber kept flying toward England, limping through the icy wind. Inside, no one spoke. They just watched the empty sky where their enemy had vanished. Charlie whispered, "He could have killed us. But he didn't." It felt unreal. Mercy had saved them. Some hours later, Ye Old Pub crossed the English Channel, barely holding together. The crew cheered weakly when they saw the coastline. The landing was rough, one wheel collapsed, sparks flew, but somehow the bomber slid to a stop. Rescue teams rushed forward, pulling out the injured men. Medics stared at the bullet-riddled aircraft in shock. "How are you alive?" one asked. Charlie looked back at the smoking sky and simply said, "A German pilot let us go." When intelligence officers questioned Charlie, they refused to believe his story. A German escorting an American bomber? Impossible. Yet the bullet patterns told the truth. The B-17 had been torn apart, then mysteriously spared. Charlie was ordered not to speak about it, the army feared soldiers might think Germans had hearts. But he never forgot the man in the Messerschmitt who had chosen honor over orders. That silent salute haunted his dreams for years. On the other side of the war, Franz Stigler returned to base. He landed quietly, engine still warm, and reported nothing about the incident. If command learned he'd spared the enemy, he'd face execution. Alone in his quarters, he lit a cigarette and stared at the ceiling. "Maybe I saved my soul today," he murmured. Yet guilt still weighed heavy, his comrades were dying daily. Showing mercy in war felt like standing against a storm. Days turned into months. The war dragged on. Franz kept flying missions, but his heart was no longer in it. Every time he fired, he remembered the faces inside that broken bomber. By 1945, Germany lay in ruins. The Luftwaffe was shattered. Franz surrendered, surviving the war but losing nearly everything: his home, his country, his brothers. Still, he carried one secret memory that made him proud: the day he refused to shoot. Charlie Brown returned to America a hero, yet fame meant little. He couldn't forget the German pilot. Who was he? Why had he spared them? After the war, Charlie joined the Air Force again, serving in peace missions. But late at night, he replayed that moment over and over: the salute, the mercy, the silence. "I owe that man my life," he'd say softly. But decades passed, and the mystery pilot remained a ghost. 40 years
the
later,
Atlantic,
in 1987,
Franz
Charlie
Stigler
was
sat
retired
reading
and
the
living
same Veterans
quietly in
magazine.
Florida. When his
One day
eyes
he
fell on
attended
the
a
ad,
veteran
he
gathering where
froze.
old soldiers shared their
The
stories.
details matched perfectly.
As he
The
spoke
time,
about the
German
place,
who spared
the
us,
damaged
many
bomber
listened in
limping
over
over
the
the
sea. Someone
He
suggested
whispered,
he try to
"It's
find
him."
the pilot. His heart
Charlie
pounded as he
doubted it
wrote
was
a letter:
possible,
"Dear
but
Charlie
the idea
Brown,
stayed.
I was the one." Soon after,
He mailed
he
it,
placed an ad
uncertain
in a
if it would ever
wartime
reach its
newsletter,
destination,
looking for the German
deep
pilot
down
he
he
hoped
hoped
fate
fate
would reconnect
17.
them. Weeks later, Charlie received the letter. As he read, his hands shook. Franz described every detail: the dead tail gunner, the salute, the escort. Tears filled Charlie's eyes. "He's alive," he whispered. Without hesitation, he called Franz. Their conversation lasted hours, two old enemies laughing, crying, remembering that frozen sky. They decided to meet in person. After 44 years, the man who could have killed him was about to shake his hand instead. When they finally met, it was like time stopped. Charlie approached first, his voice trembling: "I never thought I'd see you again." Franz smiled warmly. "I never thought you'd remember." They embraced like brothers. Reporters captured the moment, but for both men, the cameras didn't matter. They simply stood there, two pilots who had defied the madness of war. Charlie whispered, "You saved my life." Franz replied, "No, Charlie. We both saved our souls." From that day on, Charlie and Franz spoke almost every week. They visited each other's homes, shared meals, and met at air shows together. Their bond grew stronger than most friendships born in peace. People called them the Brotherhood of the Frozen Sky. When journalists asked why he spared the bomber, Franz said, "I didn't see enemies that day. I saw humans." Charlie would nod and say, "He showed me the best part of humanity." Their story spread quickly. Newspapers printed their photos side by side, an American pilot and a former German ace who once faced each other in war. Students, historians, and veterans wrote letters, calling their reunion a miracle of mercy. Both men were invited to speak about forgiveness and honor. Franz would often say, "You can win wars with weapons, but peace is built only with hearts." The crowd always stood in silence, deeply moved. Despite their smiles, both men carried pain inside. They had lost friends, homes, and years of their lives to war. Yet through their bond, they found healing. When they flew together again in a small civilian plane, Charlie joked, "You're still on my wing, Franz." Franz laughed, "And you're still flying crooked." For a moment, it felt like 1943 again, but this time, there was no enemy, no gunfire, only friendship floating in the clouds. In their later years, both pilots grew frail but never lost contact. Every Christmas, they called each other, remembering the night that changed their lives. "Merry Christmas, my friend," Franz would say softly. "You too, Franz," Charlie replied. "I'll never forget." Their voices would break with emotion. They both knew time was short, but their hearts were light. The war that once divided them had given them something pure: respect, forgiveness, and brotherhood. In 2008, Charlie Brown passed away peacefully in his sleep. At the funeral, a framed photograph of him shaking Franz's hand stood beside his medals. Friends and family shared his story, calling it the miracle of mercy. Franz couldn't attend, he was too weak, but he sent a message: "My dear friend, you showed the world that kindness never dies." Those words were read aloud, and many wept, realizing how deeply their bond had touched humanity. Just 8 months later, Franz Stigler passed away too. Some said he died of old age, others believed it was heartbreak. He had lost his final friend, his brother in spirit. On his desk lay a photo of the B-17, and a handwritten note: "Charlie, see you on the other side." The two men, once enemies in war, were now united in peace forever. Their friendship had outlived bullets, hatred, and even time itself. Today, their story is taught in schools and military academies around the world. It reminds soldiers that even in war, humanity must never be forgotten. The salute between Franz and Charlie became a symbol of honor, a message that compassion can exist even in chaos. Historians called it one of the most extraordinary encounters in aviation history. But to the men themselves, it was simply an act of conscience, born from the cold skies of 1943. In museums, their story lives on. A model of the B-17-year-old pub stands beside a Messerschmitt Bf 109, both painted with their names. Visitors read the story, often with tears in their eyes. Some whisper, if only more soldiers were like them. The exhibit carries a single quote on the wall: "The greatest victory is to choose mercy when hate is easier." That one line captures the true meaning of their legacy. Though decades have passed, pilots still tell their tale before taking flight. It reminds them that courage isn't only about fighting, it's about choosing what's right when no one is watching. Franz and Charlie's story isn't just about war. It's about the power of empathy, of looking past flags and uniforms, and seeing the human being inside. Two men from opposite sides prove that even in darkness, a single act of kindness can light the world. And so, the legend of Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown lives forever. Two men who met in the sky, one ready to kill, the other ready to die, chose a different ending. Their encounter showed that even in humanity's darkest hour, compassion could rise above cruelty. Their friendship became a beacon of light across generations. When the world remembers war, it also remembers them, the two pilots who chose mercy over madness.